We need money to live and to do things, and that's why I wanted to make this video on how you can make a living from being a creative. This video is mostly focused on being an editor slash animator because that's what I have experience with, but it should apply to most creative fields. I want to emphasize that this journey isn't one-dimensional. It'll look different for everyone. Today's video sponsor, Skillshare, can help you navigate that journey a little bit easier. You might start as an editor who wants to become a photographer, and that's where Skillshare can help you navigate that journey a little bit easier. Anyways, what I'm trying to say is embrace the journey and navigate it with an open mind. Let your passion and curiosities be the driving force behind this journey. All of the advice today is based on my personal experience, observations, and thoughts. So it's only fitting that we start with that. I've always created drawings for my parents to display, small videos playing with VFX, music videos, wedding videos, stop motion, photos of nature, my family, and anything that would catch my eye, or even following Photoshop tutorials on my first laptop and making 3D intros in Cinema 4D. My journey to making money started during my gap year. I watched a lot of big streamers and naturally I wanted to try streaming myself as well. I noticed that they all had super sick graphics, overlays and all that good stuff, and I wanted some of that too because, you know, I just can't help myself. I need the sauce. But I didn't have the money to actually pay someone to do it, so I just learned how to do it myself. Whatever I'd make, I'd just post on Twitter and people seemed to really like it. I started making overlays for friends just for fun, and I'd post it on Twitter as well and they'd share it, which just meant that more people were seeing what I was making. Each time I tried to improve, I went from static to animated overlays, trying new techniques and trying to see what was trending and try and copy that so I could learn and develop my taste within the realm of stream graphics. Most of it was just for friends in the beginning, but as I'd post it and they'd share it, more and more people would see it, and that would mean that more people would hit me up and ask if I was available for work. I undercharged by a mile, and I think that's just a good mix of just not being confident in the beginning, but also just wanting to do it because it was fun. The good thing about it is that it got me a lot of practice, and it also helped me build my portfolio because I was able to do so much work and improve so quickly. However, the most important thing was building my reputation and trust. After a while, I started feeling stagnant and just doing the stream graphics the way I'd always been doing them. And that's when I started focusing more on design and also learning the motion principles. Motion principles weren't necessarily super important in actually doing stream overlays, but it'll really set you apart if you know them. Everything I'd learned, I'd put to use. I'd make fun little projects and I'd share them, showing my development, but also my process of how I use new knowledge to solve problems. That led to even more work, but this time just a little bit different. Since my skill set was broadened, so was the clientele. All of a sudden, I was getting asked to do logo animations or YouTube edits, which is very different than anything I'd done before. I did some of that, and then I decided to start this YouTube channel, and the rest is history. Based on my experience, I've developed this little system slash framework. Now I want to emphasize that this will look different for everyone, but it should apply to you regardless of the level you're at in your career with being a creative. First one being, develop a skill. Second one, do work visibly. Super important. Last but not least, get work. This framework is cyclical, which just means that it'll repeat itself over and over again for the entire duration of your creative career. If you don't experience this cycle, it means that you're probably stuck, stagnant, or that you've just given up. There's only one prerequisite for you to make it, and that is to care more than anyone. Obviously, you need the technical skills, but having those will only take you so far. With that being said, you want to make sure that you're technically sound at whatever you throw yourself into. And that's where today's video sponsor Skillshare comes into play. Skillshare is the largest online learning community for creatives, and they have classes on pretty much anything from knitting, animation, design, even to cooking and business. And not only that, but all the classes are taught by industry professionals. Personally, I've enjoyed the structured nature of the learning paths, which basically takes you from 0 to 100 and helps you build that confidence in whatever you're throwing yourself at, which is super important when you're trying to learn something new. At this point, I've dabbled in a few different classes. Currently, I'm enjoying the Creating Your Dream Career, Uncover and Apply Your Creative Strengths class. I've been trying to learn more about storytelling, and stories are one of the most important things in human nature. Since the beginning of time, we've told stories, and that is how we communicate and relate with one another. And it's a super powerful skill if you can really master it. Something new that Skillshare has added, which I think a lot of you people who are watching this video will benefit from, are the 3 new class topics: creative careers, creative inspiration, and AI and innovation. A lot of the classes within these new topics will really help you dive into a lot of the points that I'm going to be making today. So if there's anything you're curious about, I'd highly recommend checking out Skillshare and see what they have on there. Now, whether you need to improve your technical abilities or just want to dive into a bit more of what I'm going to be talking about today, then I'd go down into the description and use my link where the first 500 people can get a 1-month free period of Skillshare. So with that being said, head down into the description, learn some more and dive deeper into pretty much every aspect of being a creative. Now, the skills I want to focus on are the intangibles, the things that will change the way you think and operate. That is what will separate you from the rest. Creating is instinctual, intuitive. Some people are more in touch with that side of themselves, but it can be cultivated. One of the most essential skills you need to master is your eye and your taste. You need to be able to tell what looks good, what feels good. And you need to be able to decide that pretty quickly. It needs to be instinctive. Some are what seems to be almost born with fantastic taste. You'll typically see those as like your creative directors or trendsetters and stuff like that. They know just within themselves what is sick and what isn't. Now, if you don't have inherently good taste, don't worry because you can learn, but it will take a long time. And it's also important to understand that taste will change. You see it all the time in fashion. Every season, we have something new. To train your taste and your eye, you need to consume. Watch critically acclaimed movies, watch old art that have stood the test of time, read a lot of the best-selling books. Learn design. At the end of it, design is the root of everything that is good. And it's super important to be selective in what you choose to consume, because whatever you end up consuming is what's gonna be your taste. So if you consume trash, well, your taste is gonna reflect that. Being a problem solver will make you invaluable. I like to define problem solving as the ability to handle unknown situations with pre-existing knowledge, or even being able to quickly pick up new knowledge and apply it in those situations. There's really only one way to train this muscle, and that is to throw yourself into situations you've never been in before. You have to force yourself to really dig deep into your knowledge bank and even supplement with new knowledge if needed. You need to train your brain to think in a non-linear way, since most creative problems can't be solved on a step-by-step basis. When it comes to communication, the most important things is learning to be clear, honest, and also responsive. Grammar is not going to be too important when you're communicating with a client, as long as you can get decent sentences sent off. What does matter is when you say you're going to do something in X period of time, then you better make sure you can deliver on it. There's nothing worse than saying you're going to do something in one day and then a week later, you haven't done it. Just like that, you've ruined all the trust between you and the client. Communication is the greatest way that you can build trust with your client. Your work is only half of that trust. Also, make sure to ask a lot of questions. If you're uncertain about something, ask. It's way better to ask and make sure of everything beforehand rather than going off and not being 100% sure, then coming back and having to redo everything because you didn't ask the questions that might seem silly. How can you expect to get work if you don't show your work? Well, the short answer is you can't. Now, this is the way that I've gone about it. I highly recommend that you try it yourself, but it's super important that you're going to be authentic. Show what you learn and how you solve problems. Think of the alphabet. Making wicked stuff will get you to G, but actually showing how you solve problems will get you to Z. And you never know when a potential client might come across your work. Even though you might catch their eye with the final product, you want to make sure that you have the how to actually lock them in. It's super important to make a good first impression, and if you can ensure that they trust you before they even contact you or before you contact them, you're way more likely to lock them in. Show them that you're capable of solving their problems. Having a portfolio is great, but you have to be super selective. Essentially, you have to master the art of curation. Having 3 phenomenal pieces is way better than having 10 mid pieces. More importantly, you want the real to be the very first thing someone sees when they go to your portfolio. We only have a very small amount of time to grab someone's attention, so if your client has to go dig in to find your work, you've already lost before the fight has even begun. Spend weeks or even months making your portfolio and your reel. You want to make sure this is the absolute best work that you've done or can do. If you don't have the actual work to showcase, make some up. Use what we learned in step 1. Create some fake projects, solve some fake problems. Just make sure that it is the very best that you can deliver. If you want to work for Nike, well, show that you can solve Nike level problems. You don't need actual clients for your portfolio. Spec work is fantastic if you are starting out in something completely new and need to show off your skill, or if you're trying to branch into a different direction and show that you can solve those type of problems as well. When it comes to social media, it's super important to be active and to be yourself. Doing exactly what everyone else does will get you just where they are. And most importantly, your clients do not care if you post gig-along threads that aren't targeted towards them. They want to see your work, they want to see your process, they want to see that you're likable and trustworthy, and that's it. Another thing is that it's super important to realize what your target audience is or what your goal with your social media is. Are you trying to get work? Well, then don't post things that concern other editors. They're your competition. You You should be posting stuff that will help you get more clients, aka your work and your process. If you're trying to do an influencer thing, that's a completely different story. All I'm trying to get at is that your social media presence will depend on your goal. Make sure that your actions align with the goal you're trying to accomplish. It's really that simple. Now you have the technical skills, the intangibles, and some work to back up the tool. It's finally time for you to actually get some clients and start making some bread. Starting out, take anything and everything. You need the experience. It's so important to get started. There are really two ways of getting clients. Either people hitting you up or you hitting people up. If you follow everything in the two previous steps, you're more than likely gonna get a lot of people reaching out to you because you've been posting your work and you've proven that you can do good work. Now, the other way is to actually go out there and find clients yourself, reaching out to them. When you do so, deliver value. Don't just hit them up, be like, hey, yeah, I'm open to do work. Show them that you can solve their problems. Don't be scared of free work either. It's a great way to get started and build that trust and establish a relationship with that person or the brand you're trying to work with. Doing one thing for free might lead to 10 paid gigs. A good example of that is a logo animation I did for Ardie. I just made it because I wanted to practice, and I ended up showing it to him because, you know, why not? You never know. And in return, he actually asked if I wanted to work on a larger gig. It can really be that simple. Prove that you can deliver value and that you're good, and the rest will take care of itself pretty much. It also helps that you reach out to somebody just showing something you've made just because it helps break down that wall sometimes where you feel like people are trying to use you for something or they're trying to get something out of you. I simply reached out, hey, I made this, here's all the files, that's it. You don't owe me anything, you don't have to like it, you don't have to share anything, you don't even have to use it. I just made it from the goodness of my heart because I wanted to, and I gave it to you because, well, it's your logo, you should see it. Don't forget the power of word of mouth either. Usually if you do really good work and you outperform the expectations, those people will in turn recommend you to their friends or colleagues who might need some of your expertise as well. Always make sure you leave a good impression and deliver value so that you can get that, because that is stronger than anything. We trust our friends, so if someone's gonna recommend you to their friend, you've already got trust before you even talk to that one person. Now, when you reach out to people or brands, it's super important to keep the person/brand in mind. I don't only mean that in terms of what their style is, but also you can't reach out to somebody with, let's say, 100 subscribers on YouTube and expect to get paid from it. They most likely don't have that type of money. So if you are looking for a paycheck or a way in or maybe a bigger network, then reach out to like mid-sized channels who might be more likely to actually get back to you and need some work from you. Same thing goes for brands. You might reach out to some local brands who could probably use your expertise, but don't expect them that they're gonna be able to pay you a whole bunch, because most of the time, smaller local businesses don't have that type of money allocated to what you're making. But it is a great way to get started and build your portfolio. Client fit is not super important in the beginning of your career since you're just trying to take anything and everything that you can get your hands on. A saying I love to use is beggars can't be choosers. It's pretty straightforward and it's true in most cases in life. Once you become more established, you can start being a little bit more picky with the people you're wanting to work with. The most important thing though is to first know what you like, because how can you find what's right if you don't know yourself? Now there's 5 things I like to keep in mind when I think about client fit. First of all, we have communication. Are they good communicators, and do you communicate well with each other? You know, some people might be great communicators, but they communicate in a different way than you, and you want to take that into consideration if you want to work with them, especially a long-term relationship. The second thing is pay. Are they willing and, more importantly, able to pay you what you think you should be paid for the type of work you're going to be doing? And are they reliable and trustworthy? Can you trust that the payment is going to come in on time and they're going to pay your invoices? The third thing is expectations. Do your expectations align in terms of how long you will take to work on something, deadlines, all that stuff, but also the expectations to the quality of work. It might be a gig where you don't have very much time, and then are they going to expect you to have Netflix production with no time at all? Or are they understood with, okay, I have this timeline and I know that the quality is going to suffer because of it? Now the fourth one is type of work. Are you going to be doing some work that you actually enjoy? For example, for myself, I like the Vox collage style animations, so I wouldn't be very happy if I did like the mangaka style animations all the time. Of course, it's necessary sometimes, but I want to make sure that it's actually work that's challenging to me and also has room for me to grow and experiment with different things. Previous gig I had, I was able to experiment more with 3D, which was super fun to me because I like trying out new things and implementing them in my workflow. Now, the fifth and final thing on my little list of things to look out for in client fit is control. This one is super big to me because I like being sort of a creative director type role, so I want to make sure I have a good amount of control over what goes on in terms of the design, animation, and all that stuff. You definitely can't demand this when you're just starting out, but when you get to a certain level, you usually tend to get a little bit more control, and just look out for it. Some people might not even want it at all. If you don't like to be in charge, then you probably don't care. But for me, it's a big thing, especially because I've spent so long developing my taste and my eye, and I usually know what looks good. Another thing in terms of control is how much you will be in charge of. Are you going to be working with a team? What's your role on the team going to be? And make sure that you know what you like before you demand all these things from a client. The way you navigate money, clients will change depending on your level. Starting out, you'll probably be doing a lot of work for free or even for dirt cheap, and that's simply because people don't know you or trust your work. Honesty here is super important because you have to be 110% honest with yourself in regards to what kind of value you deliver and your capabilities. Now, once you've truly started improving, and again, honesty is super important here, you can start raising your prices. The good thing about it is if your work doesn't back up the prices, you'll find out pretty quick because people simply won't be coming back to you. A good tip here is to figure out your expenses, and I mean the absolute bare minimum. No frivolous stuff at all. Another aspect of that is also time. You can't be spending 200 hours a week because it's just not sustainable long term, and at the end of the day, long term is what we're trying to go for. We're trying to make a living, a long-term living. Eventually, you'll get to a point where you simply have so much work that you're going to be having to turn people down. And that's usually a good time to increase your prices. It's pretty simple, supply and demand. You can keep doing this over and over again until you eventually hit a bump in the road where people are starting to say no, and that's usually where you know to stay for a little bit. There's also stuff you simply can't do by yourself. There's a cap to being a solo freelancer. And that's usually where it's a good idea to have a pretty good network or even working with agencies so that you can take on some of those larger projects if that's something you're interested in. And I just want to emphasize, I mean actual agencies, not just other people on Twitter who can't get work for themselves and are trying to start little for-fun agencies. Actual agencies with super talented people. It is in cases like these where your portfolio will really matter. Everyone in this field will experience being scammed at some point, especially when you're starting out and you don't have good systems in place. As far as actual payment goes, I always do 50% down payment before I even start moving any pixels at all. And then I make sure I get the final 50% before I actually deliver the final files. I never send full res files before I get the full payment, and don't be afraid to use watermarks just to ensure that the client doesn't run away with the work you've put in before actually getting the money. As long as you've worked on that trust I've been hammering you about since the very beginning of this video, this shouldn't be a problem at all. A great way to create some trust between the client and yourself, especially when you're just starting out working with this person, is to establish expectations. Make sure you're very clear and upfront about what they can expect and when they can expect it. Something as simple as setting some deadlines, when they can expect previews, the scope of the work, just to make them feel comfortable with them spending the money working with you. Setting a price will vary a lot from project to project. Some prefer hourly, some prefer half or full-day rates, some prefer even a per project price. Again, it all comes down to communication between you and the client. You need to make sure that you are on the same page before you even begin. To figure out what your prices should be, look at your expenses and the time you're going to be investing. Those are typically the two things I look at when I decide what to price myself. Our goal here is to make a living, not just making money. Those two things are very different. Making money is easy. You can make $1 and you've made money. Making a living is making sure that you have enough to cover the time you spend, your expenses, and then a little bit extra because we also want to be able to save and spend money on other things rather than only just living. The time it takes to actually do the work can be a bit tricky. So a way I like to redefine it a little bit is the time I won't mind spending on it. A thing might actually take 7 hours, or it might take 3, and it can be a bit hard sometimes to exactly pinpoint before doing it. So in my head, I just go, okay, I wouldn't mind spending X amount of hours for it at this price. So let's say someone pays me $100, then I'm like, okay, I'm fine with spending anywhere between 2 and 8 hours on it. Starting out, it might be a little bit easier for you to just go super cheap, especially because our main goal in the beginning when we start out is just to build up that experience, build a reputation, and establish a portfolio of work we've done and what we're capable of doing. Once you're a little bit more established, and depending on the type of client you're working with, I think full or half-day rates will work really well, just because it gives you a little bit more flexibility in the amount of time you have. At the end of the day, just make sure you're open and honest with your client about what you think it'll cost and how long it'll take. You can't say something will take 1 day, then 3 days later have nothing to show for it, and expect that the client is going to give you more time and be able to afford the extra time that it's ended up taking you. And that's why I like using that time I wouldn't mind spending on it. Last but not least, get it in writing. Have a contract, even if it's just a friend. Having something written that both of you have agreed on is just going to make everything a lot easier if something ends up changing down the line and you need to refer back to it. It's just a great way to ensure that both parties, you and the person you're working with, have understood everything in terms of the project. And just like that, you have a complete guide on how to make a living from being a full-time creative or even take your career to the next level. Now, the ball's in your hands. If there's anything you feel like I didn't cover, then make sure to watch the video again because there's a lot to take in. Now, by the off chance there's something I didn't mention, feel free to leave a comment down below and I'll make sure I get to it. And never forget, care more.